Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of In-Depth Angling. Today, I've got Navionics pulled up here on my computer. I'm going to be showing you guys how bass are going to be moving from their winter haunts of January and February to the spring spawning sites back in April and May. We're going to be covering a pre-spawn on Lake of the Ozarks today. So for us to really get started with this, you got to be able to understand where these fish are going to be coming from out here during the wintertime. During the wintertime, these bass on Lake of the Ozarks and a lot of other area lakes, and this is true for all over the country, they're going to be sitting out here along these channels, along the old river channels, the main lake points, bluff ends and stuff. So right here, this is the Osage arm of Lake of the Ozarks, and there's just really tight contour lines. This is a cliff that's over here, and you're going to come down here all the way to a point, and these bass will winter out here along these cliffs and come up to feed. And little bits of shelves and stuff, maybe some rocks have fallen off and they've created like a little itty bitty shelf that's on there from just a rock slide coming off of it, and they'll be down over here along these points. They'll be along, main lake points like this and stuff, bluff ends and things. Come up to feed for a couple hours, especially like if it's a sunny day and the wind's blowing in here. It kind of helps position bait fish like over here off of these points and stuff. Just these little itty bitty pockets and things like that where there's an indentation into the cliffs, and they'll go up there and they'll feed for short periods of time. You can catch them with wintertime baits and stuff. I have a video out about the top 5 wintertime baits that I like to use on Lake of the Ozarks. I'll link that up here for you guys. Be a little card that pops up there. Let's get right into the pre-spawn though. As these fish are going to be moving out from their winter time haunts, and they're going to be really lethargic. They're coming out of a cold winter. The lake actually has been freezing over this winter, so it's going to take a little bit longer than last year for these fish to get up and into these coves, just because of the temperature that we've been having. What you guys really want to be looking for is when the water temperature is down below 48 degrees, these fish are really going to be hanging out here still in the wintertime areas. Once it gets to that like 48 degrees to 55 degree range, they're going to be starting to enter pre-spawn, and these fish are going to be starting to move back into these coves, and they're going to be starting to go and feed up and get kind of more of an aggressive feeding mode. So they're going to be roaming around looking for bait fish, crawdads, and things like that to feed up on, so they have energy and food for them to spawn. Especially the males are going to be the first ones back here, so usually they're going to be down here fanning out the beds and stuff. These bass are going to be moving from these main lake areas, off these points, off these bluff ends. They're going to be following these creek channels back into these little pockets, like right back in here and back here in the backs of these coves and these pockets here and stuff. But along the way, they're going to be stopping along these channels to feed up and get ready for that. And so what we're going to be really looking for are like these key holding areas in these coves. So there's not really much here. This is just a tight contour line in this cove here. There's a little bit of an indentation right here, but it's just a bunch of docks and stuff. So where do you really start as they're moving back along this stuff? Well, you're going to be looking for areas that are going to have brush piles. You're going to be looking for areas that have different types of bottoms. So the bottom of the lake will oftentimes hold fish in and of itself. And what I mean by that is sometimes fish are wanting to hang on more of a chunky rock kind of bottom, more of a hard surface where the rocks are bigger and things. They're going to be keying more in on that. Sometimes they're going to be more of like on a gravel area. Sometimes it's more of like a bluff rock kind of situation. In those areas, the really hot spots to be looking for between those different bottom types, they're going to be transition zones of those. So if the bottom goes from like a hard rock, chunky bottom where the rocks are like the size of softballs down to like a pea gravel bottom, and that would probably be like, I don't know, somewhere back in here along one of these little points, maybe like over here off this little secondary point, it starts to transition back. And it'll be kind of like a harder area where you'll just notice the rock change. And then when the lake is drawn down a little bit, you can see all that up on the shore. Keep note of that for later when the lake goes back up, because fish will hold on those areas again when they go out for post-spawn. Those kind of areas can hold fish, especially if there's any kind of brush piles around, if there's docks around on top of those areas. Those are the kind of areas, those are like the spots on the spot where I'm going to be targeting those bass, because they'll congregate around there more so than they will just along the banks themselves. And if these banks are open, they're not full of docks like this here. I like to run different crankbaits and moving baits and power fish them, but if they have a lot of docks like this, you're going to have to kind of just figure out where the brush piles are in them and everything, and you're going to be probably flipping in jigs, different style of crawdad, Texas rigs, and things of that nature. These points are where I would like to start looking for some bass to really be holding on. So I'm going to kind of divide this cove up into different sections. So I'm going to be wanting to look at when they're first coming in, the water temperature is going to be around the upper 40s. They're going to be probably moving in over here to some of these little points. Maybe they come in here for these pockets on a warmer day, especially if you have any kind of warmer rain that comes in. If you have like a 60-degree day where it's raining and the water temperature's in the 40s, well, the back of these little cuts and stuff are going to be dumping in that runoff water. And it might be a little bit muddier back there, but the water temperature will be raised up a few degrees and those bass will flock right back there to it. And it's also going to help you if you find coves like this one, or if you move up here a little bit further. These couple coves here where these bass are going to be coming in off of this channel and going back into congregating around these points and transition zones back to the spawning pockets, especially areas that will be taking a southern wind. So if the wind's coming up here from the south going north, the air is usually warmer and it heats up that water. So a cove that would be facing up here towards the north would get warmer faster than this cove down here. So the fish will be ready to spawn a little bit sooner, and they might be a little bit further back on these coves than they will be on these to start off the year. And I still like to divide this up cove by cove from where you're catching them, because you can pattern the fish easier this way. If you're starting to get a couple bites in here, like the first quarter of the cove or so, they're just kind of hanging out over here off of these main lake points, just off of them inside of here. Maybe there's like some brush piles along these docks or something that you're catching them off of. You move it back in here to like the second quarter of it, like back in here over to halfway, you're not catching a whole lot either. You catch a couple, and then you get back here and you're starting to catch a whole bunch of them. The fish have moved back further and this cove's been warmer up. And then you want to kind of take that, a mental note of that, and move on to other coves that are similar like that. You're going to want to kind of divide this up. You're going to want to try to fish the cove into different sections and try to pinpoint what areas of the cove that they're actually hitting. Is it towards the mouth? Is it towards the middle? Is it towards the back? What kind of bottom am I catching these fish on? Are they relating to this type of transition of the bottom more than this type of transition of the bottom? Are they going from like a mud bottom to a gravel bottom? Is that where they're at? Or are they on a chunk rock bottom to a pea gravel bottom? What was the wind like when you were catching them? If the wind was straight in on the point and they were stacked up right on the tip of the point, or if they were further off to the side. The wind will really position bait fish, and as those fish are running around trying to forage up before they go into spawning and they're just guarding their nest, they want to be good and healthy to be able to do that with lots of energy. Their metabolism is starting to get higher and higher as the water temperature gets up. So the further back in the cove, they're going to be a little bit more active most of the time, and further along we get with the pre-spawn, they're going to be a little bit more aggressive. So another example would be like this cove down here, also on the Osage arm. It's a little bit further on past mid-lake over here. There's a big river channel that's over here across this, kind of a bluffy area. To see how dark these contours are right here. They're really tight. It's just a straight sheer drop off, and they're going to come in and they're probably going to be staging up on these points and this bluff over here during the winter. Going to be moving in. They're going to start coming in. They're going to find these couple secondary points. And then follow these creek channels down. I'll be looking for brush piles, I'll be looking for rock transitions, and just kind of taking mental note of where those fish are going to be located at along those transitions, where they're going to be biting inside of the brush piles, like what depth they're at inside the brush pile. You can make a pattern off of it and just start going to cove. And so like let's say I caught all my fish midway back in this big cove right here. I'm going to go over to this cove and start midway back and start looking for those same kind of rock transitions and brush piles in the same kind of depth range. You're going to be getting the same kind of fish. At that point, you just kind of cove hop, and you can go section to section and really be getting into some good fish. One thing that can really affect how bass are going to be biting those days that they're in the pre-spawn are cold fronts. A lot of times in the spring we have a mixed bag of weather because we're in Missouri and other parts of the country as well, but it's just a transition period for weather, and we have some crazy rain, we have sometimes snow, we have cold winds, warm winds, and it just makes the fish kind of lose their minds a little bit with where they're going to be, and they don't really stay super active whenever there's a huge front that moves in most of the time. So let's say that they're coming off the main lake here in this big long cove. A lot of people think, oh, they moved back out to deeper water because there was a cold front. Well, they're not really going to move too far. If they're all the way back in here and they move like a mile back into this cove, they're not going to run a whole mile back out and then restart. They're going to be back here and they're just going to kind of drop off a little bit further into this deeper water that's just off, or they'll just lay down right in the mud and they won't bite. And in those situations, you have to get them to bite reactively, and what that means is you're going to be needing to probably run crankbaits by multiple angles and bouncing them off of rocks off the bottom, and different angles, like if there's a fish sitting right next to a rock on the bottom laying down because there's a cold front and he's just really not wanting to eat, you're almost going to have to run it like right by his face in a lot of cases to get him to bite something. Or you're going to have to really slow down and fish very finesse if the water clarity is still good enough for you to be able to do that. Fishing little Ned rigs and shaky heads down there on the bottom can be very productive. Little finesse jigs and things of that nature can get bites, but it gets to be a lot slower. Those fish aren't going to go away. So if you are catching them really good one day and there's a cold front that comes in, and you're like, well, where'd all the fish go? Did they all run back out to the main channel? I wouldn't be running out so fast. I'd look around the immediate area where you were catching them the day before. If there was a cold front, and I would be slowing down. I would be trying to really get those fish to react to your bait and go a little bit more finesse with your approach as well if you have the water clarity good enough to be able to do that. Areas for you guys to be looking for that will heat up first, and these fish will be in pre-spawn the soonest, would be these upper river arms, because the lake is shallower up here. The water is going to heat up faster than it will down by the dam and where there's deeper water. So up here on the main channel, it's only like 20 foot deep along the Niangua. So these fish up here will get closer to pre-spawn the soonest in the lake, especially because this is the Niangua arm of the lake, and Ho'otonka's up here kicking out 55-degree water from the spring. So these are the kind of areas that I would be looking for some of these pre-spawn fish to be active the first. These coves up here on these river arms are not usually the biggest. They're really small, they're tiny. I'm just going to be looking like even in here, these fish will go back here to spawn in these areas. There's not even any points in them. They're just straight channel banks and stuff. And so you see how tight the contour lines are in this. If I zoom in a little bit more, you can really see that it does drop off. So you have like 13, 19 foot right here, 15, 12. So I mean, it shallows out back here in the flat, which they will go back to spawn, but they're going to follow this, and they're not really going to be leaving super far out either. They might kind of come back out a little bit over here to just this deeper basin, but that's it. And they'll be laying down there in the mud, and you guys just kind of got to figure out where those transition zones are in these little pockets, because there's not really points to key in on or anything like that. You're going to be looking for brush piles, and you're going to be looking for transition zones especially, and running crankbaits down there right along where those rock transitions are one of my favorite things to do. Spinner baits work great, but some of the baits I like to use in this area of the lake to start off, and really anywhere where the water temperature is closer to that 48-degree range, are the same baits I use during the wintertime, and also really early pre-spawn. And as we get further into it, I like to utilize spinner baits a lot more. I like to utilize square bills more. I like to utilize Senkos and different kind of weightless flukes and things like that, little swim baits. Getting those more active fish to feed up and everything on your baits is a lot easier, because you're not having to slow down quite as much. The warmer the water gets, their metabolism gets faster, and you're able to catch them more power fishing than what you would sometimes during the winter. Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you liked this video, drop a thumbs up down below, and please subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you on the next one.